Welcome to the Awaken the Awesome podcast with your host, Oriyede. This is Awaken the Awesome, a podcast where we take a moment to acknowledge that we are all in this together. Through enlightening conversations and personal insights, we like to connect with individuals just like you who show us how they are bringing a little bit of awesomeness in their individual journeys. Our hope is to encourage you to always keep pushing and to stay awesome along the way. You would think I'd be used to this by now, but I'd be lying if I told you that were the case. Sometimes you take a step back after a recording and you have to take it in and ask yourself, did that really happen? I've been a fan of my next guest's work and craft for over 10 years, and he has quite honestly been one of my podcasting and photography heroes. Indeed, a lot of the effort I've put into this very podcast you're listening to have been in many ways inspired by him, and he certainly has the track record to show for it. With over 25 years of experience in the photographic industry, Ibarionex Perello is the author of 6 successful books, including Chasing the Light, Improving Your Photography Using Available Light, and his latest, Making Photographs, Developing a Personal Visual Workflow. As a podcaster, he is the producer and host of the wildly popular The Candid Frame podcast, which he has been producing and hosting for 13 years as of this recording. After nearly 500 episodes, his dedication and exemplary consistency have made this podcast a staple among photography circles. As a remarkable photographer, his photographs and articles have appeared in numerous publications and websites, including Digital Photo Pro, Outdoor Photographer, Rangefinder, and Popular Photography, just to name a few. As an educator, he is a course instructor at the Los Angeles Center of Photography, where he holds regular workshops on street photography. With a sense of genuine warmth and kindness, Ibarionex shared his personal insights on dedication, consistency, doing the work, not buying into your own hype, his recent diagnosis with ADHD, and so much more. What's it like to meet your heroes? Thanks to a delightful combination of intent, action, preparation, and opportunity, I got to find out. This one was a very personal victory for me, in more ways than one, and yet another amazing conversation, which I do hope you'll enjoy. So let's get into this. Awaken the Awesome, episode 101 with Ibarionex Perello. Here we go. In all honesty, because again, I did try to think, okay, what can I possibly say to a guy who's been doing this for 13 years and everything? And you know what? I just took a step back leading up to this conversation because, we connected, and we took this appointment a really long time ago. So I'm like, why is he your hero? Why is it? Because I know you probably don't want to hear this because with my exposure to your personality and all your various interviews over the past, 10 plus years, I realized that, you're very humble, a very warm, kind, generous person. So you probably don't want to hear that. You know what? I really, 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 really respect everything that you've done with your craft and your teaching and, just opening up, so many opportunities for up and coming as well as, established photographers, with the Candid Frame podcast. But for me, I really went back to the basics. It was like, and it was so funny. I know people that are listening to this on audio probably don't see, but does it mean anything to you?
Oh, man, you got it.
I genuinely resonated with this because I'm holding up Ibarionex's book called Chasing the Light, Improving Your Photography with Available Light. And why this story is so important is because when I first came to Montreal, again, with college and college books being so expensive and living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, you try to, minimize costs as best as you can. Mm-hmm. And at the time, my wife had given me a camera. And I was a Nikon D80 at the time. And what was fun about it is like, okay, you want to make good photographs, you want to learn the craft and everything, and, listening to all your interviews and learning as much as you can, learning about your subjects and being present and analyzing and using the available light. And I couldn't afford a flash. So I'm like, okay, what can I do? And it just so happens that you put out this book. And all this to say, guys, and anybody listening to this, if anyone would have told me, leading up from this book was actually published in 2011. You started a Candid Frame, I believe, in 2000. When was it? 2006?
2006, yeah.
2006, because the first episode was February 15th, 2006. And 10 years down the road, if I would be sitting across, virtually at least, to one of my photography and podcasting heroes, I would not believe you. And I believe that's one of the messages I want to push out and open the conversation with. You never know where life will take you. but stay committed to your journey and your purpose and your truth. And you never know what the adventures are going to reveal. So opening up again, thank you for being on the podcast. And it's a pleasure to welcome you, sir.
Oh, thank you, man. I feel very flattered and honored. And you're right. I don't take compliments very easily. My wife has been sort of trying to get over that, but I embrace it a lot more than I used to. So I really take it to heart, especially your sincerity about it. It's really nice to know that, the work that I've done, both in terms of the podcast and the book, have resonated with you and with, so many other people. It really
means a lot. It means a lot. Definitely. I have to say, and, my wife sometimes knocks me inside of the head for that. I sort of been a little bit lazy on the photography side, obviously with life and everything happening, but, I still try to get out with the camera from time to time because you always keep preaching, take your camera everywhere you go, try to stay curious, go out there. But I have to admit, I've been a bit lazy, but, just talking about that, with all this legacy, 13 plus years, what does that say about, because I'm very big about about authenticity. That's the word I want to bring up. Just saying you can't put in 13 years of your life to something that you're not passionate about. And I just wondered, did you actually envision it going so far?
Well, I knew in some nebulous way that it would be successful, but I didn't define what that would be. I just knew that if I created it, that there would be people there who would listen to it and were kind of hungry for it, largely because I was hungry for it. I wanted to hear conversations like this, and I really wasn't hearing it when I started listening to podcasts back in 2005. There were other podcasts out there, but largely they were dedicated to, equipment and technique. There would be the occasional interview, but I would often be frustrated by a question that was posed, and the photographer would answer it, and then would move on to another question. I went, wait.
I want to know more.
Follow up with something else. They just said something really interesting. So I just felt, well, if no one else is doing it, let me try and figure it out. Because I had interview skills in my role as a writer and an editor for photo magazines. And just because of my career up to that point, I knew a lot of photographers. So I just needed to figure out how to produce a podcast, how to create a blog. And I think just the idea that I knew that it would be quote unquote successful helped me to get over those initial humps. But I don't think I could have envisioned that I would still be doing it 13 years. I really didn't even think about it. I was just thinking about what the very next thing was. And, I had no grand scheme about the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know other people have done, a lot of things after their podcasts and sort of launched it as a means for them to earn an income and all that other stuff. And largely for me, I have not leveraged it in that way. And, sometimes I regret not doing it, but there are other times it's like, well, I like what I'm doing. Do I really want to, dedicate my energy to other things in order to build on it? And it's like, I'm just fine sitting down with somebody for an hour and just talking shop. The only challenge is trying to find the means to sustain it, not only in terms of time but money.
There you go. It's definitely something, and you speak on that in terms of patience, and because sometimes it's not easy. You're talking to a guy with a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage, and a full-time job, but sometimes, there are those moments where you just have to ask yourself, what am I doing? It's like, why am I doing this? Am I a sucker for punishment? But there is that consistency and that audacity, that wanting to just make something happen, to create. That's the fuel behind it. Sometimes it is selfish. You use that word in the very first episode. You really did, because yes, I did do my research before recording this. You got to stay professional, but you did mention that in the very first episode, and it really humbled me. The fact that you just come out with it, like, listen, there are other podcasts out there, and you're free to go listen, but this is a work in progress. I apologize for the crappy audio. I'm going to learn to use this technology. And you spoke on that in terms of trusting the process and just getting out there. It can't be perfect. And I wonder if you could speak on that in terms of sometimes that we get so afraid to put ourselves out there and just learn along the way. We so want to be perfect. And I was wondering if you could just speak on that, just to, address these fears and these insecurities that we often have to live with.
You make me want to listen to that first episode. I have not listened to it since I released it.
It's a gem. It's a gem. It's a gem because you really come out with such an earnest and frank humility about it, and you actually just tell it to the listeners, like, welcome, this is an adventure, this is what's going to happen, I'm learning along the way, this is going to be, there are going to be some bumps and bruises, but if you trust me and you're generous enough to stay patient, I'm going to try to learn this and we're going to try to do better. And you do say it. Local photographers in my area, in the country, or around the world. I'm like, you have no idea where this is going to go.
That's funny. I think part of it was the fact that there was really very little to compare myself to back in 2006. Mm-hmm. That I didn't have examples of quote unquote great podcasters in my genre that I had to emulate myself, that I really had to sort of compete with, because I was creating something that I felt was very unique unto itself. It hadn't been done yet, at least in this particular format. Mm-hmm. So I think that freed me from the perils of comparison, and someone said that comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that's very apt, because when it comes to like photography, for example, there's no shortage of people that I could compare myself to. And doing the podcast taught me that comparison of where I am relative to somebody else, the quality of my work compared to somebody else, that comparison does a disservice to me whenever I do it.
Really?
Because I'm only as good as I can be at that particular moment. But as long as I'm putting in the work, I'll get better. And that, if I look at someone else's work who's doing stuff that I'm not doing or that I'm striving for, that I can take that as a point of inspiration and also a point of education. But ultimately, it's going to come down to me going on there and making it happen. And with the podcast, there were so many mistakes I made along the way.
Really?
Oh yeah. Just in terms of learning the audio, I was playing around with things, trying to make it sound better and not having any clue about audio engineering or nothing like that. So the audio quality would just like vary fairly widely. I made mistakes like not turning on the recorder, when I was doing an interview, or not having a backup, or not saving my backups, and any you name it. In terms of anything that can go wrong with the podcast, I've probably done it. I've had to do interviews over again because some problem. I probably have had to do that like maybe 5, 6, maybe even 7 times. And you just roll with it. I don't beat myself up. I beat myself up a little for it when it does happen, but from most of it, it's just about that's just part of the process. It's not about achieving a sense of perfection. It isn't. It's about, embracing the wins and the failures, all of that's part of being a creative of any sort. If you always think that you're going to hit a home run every time you get up to plate, mm-hmm. you probably won't even get to first.
That is so true. That is so true. And, whether it be whatever creative field, and, we can even broaden the scope in terms of just as you put it, just trying to do better. If we just focus on the task at hand and try to just execute on the basics, and then we build from there. And then we build from there, and then we build from there. I make no apologies about it. I've made mistakes along these recordings as well. And, sometimes, I beat myself up over the audio, and you get obsessive about it. It's like, you're only as good as the previous, as this episode. And then how can we build from there? How can we build from there? But it's about, as you put it, it's about accepting that you are a work in progress, and you're not going to hit a home run anytime. And it's exhausting to attempt to. That'd be foolish. And I really want to thank you for that. I want to go back to, because you've done previous, interviews with that, but I really got curious as I was taking notes. You talked about, how the Boys and Girls Club was where it all started. Mm-hmm. And just trying to flip the question a little bit. What would have happened if you've never showed up to the Boys and Girls Club?
Oh my God.
Imagine.
I have no idea what would happen to me. Probably not much good, I don't think. I was in theater in high school, and I was thinking about, being an actor, but soon after I got out of high school, I realized I really didn't have, my heart into doing everything that I would need to do in order to be a working actor in any
Mm-hmm.
sort. I probably would have just meandered from, mediocre job to mediocre job, just trying to earn a living, keeping a roof over my head. If I didn't have that, I don't know that I would have had the clarity or the passion, the kind of passion that would lead to a kind of clarity in terms of the general direction I wanted to go to. So I think I probably would have meandered through life, and maybe I would have been lucky enough to find something. But considering the way the world works most times, I see so many people who don't. So I probably would just been one of those other people who would like dabble in this and dabble in that, and got married and suddenly have kids, and all of a sudden you're just like having to sustain a family and always longing for something more meaningful in life. So, and I think that's unfortunately the story of so many people. So I think I just would have been one of the many. I would like to think otherwise, but if I'm being completely honest, considering who I was at that time when I was younger, more than likely that's probably what would have happened.
What was it like growing up, at that point?
It was interesting. I was growing up in South LA. My parents were both immigrants from the Dominican Republic. By the time I joined the club, I was pretty much a kid in isolation. I would watch television. I would go to the library and just like immerse myself in books and stories. I wasn't really social with the other kids at school and in the neighborhood. We might play baseball, out on the street or something like that. But I really couldn't say that I had a best friend or a group of guys that I hung out with. But when I joined the boys club, it gave me a level of interaction with other people my age, which was fun. I, got really good at foosball, table soccer, and pool. And then when photography was introduced to me by one of the counselors, I really kind of thrived in there. So I think having that really was sort of a lifesaver for me in many ways. Personally, I think it helped me just not be so isolated in a degree, because I think through junior high school, even some parts of college, I really had difficulty in terms of socializing with people unless I had a structure through which I was interacting with people, like when I was working on the school newspaper or was working on the on theater productions or something like that. If I had a structure, then I had a dynamic that allowed me to have relationships with people. But outside of that, I was really kind of clueless. So it was kind of natural for me to see photography and see the camera as the means of being able to connect to other people.
Okay.
Because left with no other devices, I really didn't know where to start.
Does that come from a personal shyness or insecurity, or did you ever try to just look inward?
I think it's all that. Self-esteem is probably a big part of it, and just lacking the skill set in terms of, how do you be a friend? And part of it was like that because I was so isolated and I felt very vulnerable. I always keep things very close to my vest, and only later did I realize that the way you make friends is by being open. Mm-hmm. By making yourself vulnerable, by making other people's concerns of interest to you, and showing that you do care about them. But because I was so guarded and was constantly sort of in fear of being ridiculed or humiliated, I really wasn't skilled. I didn't develop the skills that's required to be a good friend to somebody.
Okay.
I was always very obsessively self-conscious, and that makes it very difficult because you're every minute you're thinking about what you say or what you're going to do, how someone else is going to react to it. And so you're constantly in your own thoughts, and you're not in the moment.
You're always analyzing.
And I think people sort of sense that.
Do you think that if you're just looking outward in, do you believe that we've evolved? Do you believe that you've evolved? You've made some progress?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not like that anymore. part of it's getting older. So, and one of the things I was talking to a friend of mine is, you don't give an F anymore about what other people think. It's like, okay. I mean, it's still there, but it doesn't influence me to the degree it did in the past. It's like, well, people are going to like my work, but some people are not going to like my work. Some people are going to like me. Some people are not going to like me. Some people are going to be completely indifferent to me. It is what it is. I don't have to please everybody in the room. And before, if there were 100 people in the room and there was one person who didn't like me or didn't like my work, I would be obsessed about that one person, ignoring the other 99 people in the room. It's crazy.
In this age of comparison and just overexposure of every single aspect of our lives, I believe there's so much anxiety going on. And thank you so much for speaking on this thing that I'm trying to teach my kids, which is about acceptance. You're not going to please everybody. You cannot be everybody's friend, because guess what? Everybody's different. And I really want to thank you for speaking on that, because, whether it's through our photography, trying to create work, because we want our work to be shown, but at the same time, we want our work to matter to us, and I believe there's a lot of that anxiety going on. It's a very, 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 very humbling thing that you just put out. So I really want people to resonate with this in terms of, you are where you're supposed to be, and accept who you are and build from there. But you need to, first of all, accept yourself. And, it's a very powerful thing. Talking about that, because again, with all the acknowledgement and all the accolades, because again, you can't even think of a single, top 10 or top 5 photography podcast, and your camera frame always keeps coming up. How do you stay humble with so many achievements? Because again, you are a name of the game right now. You are. You don't want to hear it, but you are. But how do you stay humble?
I have no real sense of that. People tell me that, and I go, oh, that's cool. And then I got so much stuff to keep me busy. I really don't get to sort of indulge in that.
You don't.
So no, I mean, it doesn't fit into what my day to day. So it's like every time I get up in the morning, I got to walk the dog, got to take out the garbage, make a cup of coffee, get to work, just the normal stuff of life. It's not like, I sometimes joke with my wife. It's like, you're sitting here with a published author, baby. And she just goes, yeah, okay. And I say it sort of jokingly, because she knows, it's just my way of sort of ribbing her. But that's about the extent of my, being in that space. And back when I was younger, I wanted something that kind of thing that would make interacting with people easier. You think, like, for example, fame. You get fame, it'll be easier to get to know people because they're going to want to know you, sort of thing. And now it's kind of like when people recognize me or they approach me about the show, I'm just flattered that to have them as a listener, and just pleased that what I do has helped people. In some cases, people have told me how much I've changed their lives, and it's like, that's very, very humbling. To think that something that I do in my garage is making that kind of difference is really is not something I take for granted. So it's, as much as people think it may like feed my ego, I have things that always keep me in check here, including a wife I've been married to for 26 years who doesn't hesitate to check my ego.
Oh, I got it. You have to acknowledge the wives. My wife is all the same, because we just celebrated 10 years or so. We've been together for 16, but we just celebrated 10 years of marriage. And sometimes, thank you so much. And you can't acknowledge, even though I'm sure that you experience this as well. Like, okay, the canvas frame is your baby, but you'd be pompous to believe that you did this all yourself. And the people you surround yourself with is important. Your peers and the people who keep you in check, as you say. And that matters a lot, because a lot of people, you talk about that, a lot of people isolate themselves thinking that you have to go it through yourself, but you don't, and it's a terrific thing to actually acknowledge the fact that, along your journey, there's no shame in asking for help.
You have to, because it's like you save yourself a lot of grief by just admitting that you don't know something or you don't know how to do something, and you could do with some help from somebody else. You just have there's twisted thinking if you think you have to figure it out on your own. Because as as creatures, as animals, we were never designed to do that. But, at least in America, I can't speak for anywhere else. This is the ideal of the idealistic loner, right? Who doesn't need anybody else, who always sort of drifts off into the sunset by themselves, has been put out as some sort of ideal, especially with respect to men and their identity. And, I don't think it works. I think it's just a glorified myth, because in the real world, we need each other.
Collaboration is important. It matters. Oh, yeah. And, in this day and age, I especially learned that, you talk about the university of YouTube, and as simple as making a call, sending out an email, sending a tweet or anything, you'd be surprised. And I've learned this, because I've only been doing this about a year and a half or two, and you realize there's a huge podcasting community out there, and there's always someone willing to help you out.
Yeah.
I've hit bugs with software or, different tactics or like how to edit and stuff, and I'm still learning. And it's amazing if you just, check your ego, as you said, and open up your curiosity and humility. Hey, I need help. And you're like, yeah, do this. Have you tried this? You should try to do this. I'm like, I did not think about that. It's something that people need to, just recalibrate in terms of, what, you don't have to go through this alone.
Yeah. And with all the, people talk about the internet and all the trolls and all the negativity out there, but I think the great majority of people out there are kind, are generous, are helpful. And if that's the spirit from which you come, you can't help but draw those kind of people to you.
I know you never want to think about, who your favorite guests are. I'm asking the question because I go back to one of my, I don't know why it was one of my favorite episodes, but Douglas Kirtland, episode 71 was an amazing one. I don't know what it was about that conversation, because you even opened up the conversation by saying, like, sometimes the photo gods get really generous. And there's that humility and that sense of innocence that you bring to the interview. And there's that warmth and genuine sense of, openness and sharing knowledge that Douglas brings to the conversation, which makes it for a terrific conversation. And sometimes, even you walking away from an interview, are there actually people who are like, I would never think these people would be on my podcast? How does that feel?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many people who I just, my go-to, I don't really have a favorite interview, but there are interviews with people who I admired when I first discovered photography, like William Albert Allard, Marilyn Mark, Elliot Erwitt, Dan Winters, Eli Reed. These are people whose books have been on my shelves forever. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting there talking with them, either in face-to-face or over my computer, and I could pinch myself that, these people whose work I've sort of absorbed and learned from are talking to me, and they're talking to me as a peer. And that for me is just like, I just get giddy. But even when I'm sitting down and interviewing someone who may not be a known name, I just so look forward to it. I get somebody, and when I know I got an interview scheduled that day and they're going to come here to the office, or I'm going to, do a call over the computer, man, I get so excited. Oh God, I'm going to get a chance to talk shop with somebody whose work I really, really like. And that's all I need, man. And everything to work.
Don't forget to hit record, check the audio, and
check the backup. Always
check
have a
backup. Always have a backup, and work your way from there. You learn along the way. You learn, and again, you learn once, and then you learn twice. If it happens a third time, it's sort of become your style. Like, okay, can we adjust? Can we adjust? I would like to talk a little bit about, because again, I always come at this from a learning experience, and your legacy with what you've created with this thing, it's amazing, because 13 years, there's patience involved, there's dedication involved, there's resilience, there's, again, always willing to learn. And I was wondering if you could just, again, tell people that you don't need to have all the answers, but don't stand still. Just keep showing up.
Yeah. Yeah, because people, and I've done this myself, so I'll just speak for myself. We sometimes think that we either, one, need permission from somebody else, which is never the case, and two, that we need the right equipment to do it, which is never the case. And I think those two things alone keep a lot of people from playing and experimenting. I mean, if you want to just interview somebody, you have a phone which has a camera, a microphone. You could just use that.
There you go.
It doesn't have to be, yeah, it's not going to be as nice as having an expensive microphone and being in a studio. But what I've learned is it's the content that matters. People are very forgiving of the fact that it doesn't sound perfect. This isn't NPR radio where the standard for audio quality is really high.
Mm-hmm.
In podcasting, it's pretty forgiving. This doesn't mean that you can put out poor audio, because I've gotten off a podcast after 10, 15 seconds when the audio is just absolute crap. But if you take some modicum of care in terms of just understanding what it is and not just putting it out there for the sake of putting it out there,
Mm-hmm.
You could probably produce something that could be of interest to somebody out there. And I think the mistake that a lot of people who are getting into sort of podcasting or any sort of thing now is they are seeing other people who have these huge audiences within a relatively short period of time, like all these YouTuber influencers.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these people go, I want to get on board on this and I want to have tens of thousands of followers so I can get free stuff and I can be invited to trips. And it's like, if that's why you're doing it, you're not going to be doing it for very long, because you quickly realize that there is a lot of work and effort involved in doing this on a consistent basis. And that's why so many people, whether it's podcasting, whether it's photography, whether it's painting, whether it's learning to play a musical instrument or learning a language, why so many people just sort of peter out.
A lot of times.
Yeah, you have to really ask yourself, why am I learning this?
The why is important?
Yeah, the why is important. You may not really know it, but you have to understand that at some point you're going to get pushback from the world, right? Especially with respect to our time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to go, even though time is tight, that you have to be so committed to it that you're going to go, I'm going to make the time. I'm going to find the time. I'm not going to make an excuse to not do this. And if you're on board on that, if you're patient enough, it will pay off. But if you're invested in anything for the wrong reasons, it's hard to believe that it's really going to sustain itself to the point that you are eventually able to get the very things you're expecting to get. And if my experience is any indication, you just stay committed, and then things start happening in your life that you never could have thought of, that you never anticipated would happen in the first place.
I like to tell people it's really colorful, the example I like to use, but it's so funny. I may not know where this ship is headed. There's still a lot of fog, but I'm enjoying the ride.
Yeah.
That's
it, man. You got to enjoy the ride. That's really what it's about. If you're enjoying the ride, regardless of anything else that's happening, that's important, because there you're living life.
There you go. It's a tremendous feeling. I would like to talk, because this really hit home for me. We have two very young children, 6 and 3, but our daughter, our youngest, still having these little issues growing up. We've been observing her for the past year, in terms of fidgety and, absent-mindedness and everything. And for some reason, leading up to this conversation, I reread your newsletter, your post you sent about, the interview you had on your show, and how you've been open about, your recent diagnosis with ADHD. And, coming from your perspective as an adult living with the condition, if you had any, particular tips or how to properly approach a situation in regards to it. We haven't formally diagnosed her yet, because we're still, having her, doing the necessary observations and stuff. But I was wondering if you were just open about, just coaching, having particular observations or tips on how to,
Yeah, wow. Since my experience has been isolated to being an adult, because I only got diagnosed a year and a half ago. So it's really hard for me to offer advice to people who have children who may or may not be, living with ADHD. But I think what you're doing is kind of spot on. It's kind of observing, getting educated about what it means to have ADHD, and to practice patience. I think as a father, it's making it okay that your daughter is having trouble maintaining her attention or any of the behaviors she's manifesting. Because I think for me, as a young kid, when that stuff started happening, because I didn't think I had anybody I could talk to about it, I just tried to hide it. I would just try to not call attention to the fact that I was struggling, especially when it came to learning certain things or just doing certain things. I could have done with help if I'd asked, but I think that there's a certain degree of shame that when you see other people being able to do things so easily that you can't, that there's something wrong with you. And so you feel like, okay, I can't let other people know that because it'll give them something to use against me. And I think that, I can't call it a mistake because I was just a kid then. It just made lots of sense that's what's there. But it was something that I carried well into adulthood, that even as an adult, I was obsessed with trying to be perfect and never trying to make any mistakes and being reluctant to go up to somebody and say, I don't know how to do this. Could you help me? Feeling like I got to figure this out by myself. And oftentimes I would, but sometimes it would be, I would create a situation where the struggle to do that was more difficult than it would have been to ask somebody, can you help me with this?
Okay. And ever since the diagnosis, as you mentioned, it's only been a year. How has life changed? Is there, are you feeling more comfortable? Are you feeling more open? Is there a certain, weight lifted off your shoulder? Because you mentioned in the newsletter how, you understood how certain patterns evolved, just growing up. How's that changed for you?
Well, that alone was a big relief because suddenly I understood why I was the way I was all of my life.
Okay.
Why certain things I could be laser focused on and other things I really struggled with being able to maintain sufficient concentration to be able to do. And basically I learned that it wasn't my fault, because I think I'd been leading my life up to that point feeling when I couldn't do those things or when I struggled to do those things, that there was something wrong with me.
Okay.
And I would beat myself up for it. Because there were so many times when the things I needed to do were so simple, but I couldn't manage to do it. And it was like, what's wrong with me? This person here can do it and it's nothing. And yet here I am, struggling with doing this thing and I can't. And I feel like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong? And I would just beat myself up. And once I understood what was happening, it was like, oh, okay, that's what it is. And it was a huge burden off my shoulders. It was at that point, anytime those things came up again, it was like, oh, okay, that's what it is. And it just lifted so much emotional weight off of my shoulders to recognize, oh, that's what's going on. And as a result of talking to other friends who have ADHD, I was able to discover that I wasn't alone and that this experience was very, very common. And, I utilize a variety of different resources. I do use medication in order to temper that part of it, but I think it's not just the medication. It's the change of perception. It's been different choices that I make when those moments and those feelings come along. All of that in combination have made negotiating my life a lot easier. It doesn't completely go away, but having an understanding of why it is and what choices you can take when those circumstances arise in my life make negotiating my life so much easier. But I think the biggest thing is just the fact that it's not that I'm faulty. It's not that I'm defective. It's not that I'm less than.
Right.
And I think I carry that for so much of my life. But for the most part, a lot of people didn't see it. They would just see that it looks like he's able to function fairly well. But inside, I was constantly wrestling with this on a day-to-day basis, and I don't have to do that anymore.
Wow. See, it's a beautiful thing when we try to understand, not just criticize, the dialogue that we have within ourselves and in regards to others. Again, with, the concept of people surrounding us, as you mentioned, probably growing up, everybody's saying, oh, that's just him being a kid, or like he's just fidgety, or he can't sit still, or there's a lot of that going on. And you talk about the perception, whether from other people or towards ourselves, that has a lot of weight. And, we need to have those important conversations with the people that we care about and with ourselves, and try to build from there. And it's a beautiful thing to know that you're dealing with it in a positive spin, and it's only gotten better from there. So I'm really happy that it's going along well. So that's one thing I want to get out there. What else did I want to ask you about in terms of just for the people out there who still are dealing with that? Let's call it a little bit of confusion. Because a lot of people that listen to these recordings are always about, and again, it's so wild when you get DMs of people saying like, "Oh, yeah, I love your work." It's like, okay, I thank you, but I get a lot of comments regarding to a lot of people who don't know what they want in terms of there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of cloudiness in regards to, am I doing the right thing? What is my purpose? What is my why? I know it's a really big philosophical question, but from your own perspective, how can we get better at defining our why?
I think that you just have to be willing to try different things. Because I think that, especially as adults, it's a little more difficult to find that thing that you feel you're kind of meant to do. As kids, we're subject to a lot, or we used to be, subjected to a variety of different things. Because school was under the best circumstances, designed to give you a broad sense of the different things that are out there: math, sciences, the arts, music, etc. As an adult, you are kind of, your exposure to such things becomes more and more limited, especially as you get a job, you have kids, and suddenly, the variety of potential of possibilities becomes very restricted. So it really becomes an issue of going, well, what kind of interests me? And I think probably it's kind of the easiest way, I would think, is to kind of go back to when you were a kid. Mm-hmm. What excited you when you were a kid? Was it like drawing on pieces of paper? Was it athletics? Was it listening to music? Because I think whatever thing sort of fascinated you as a child is probably the first place you should probably go back to, rather than trying to think, okay, what can I do with my life now? Because I think that as kids, unfortunately, a lot of us at some point have an interest in something and it gets dampened by something. Someone saying something that demeans or diminishes what you're interested in. The point of comparison of saying, hey, you're not as good as that person, so why are you doing it at all? I have a friend who was really interested in drawing, and some teacher during a parent-teachers conference criticized his drawing. And I can't remember exactly how they criticized it, but he heard that, and he didn't draw again for decades. And it was only in his 50s that he returned to it. Because that criticism and the fact that his parents didn't stand up for him really impacted him. So I think that, not that every circumstance is that harsh, but I think that as kids, we kind of gravitate to the things that excite us without having to think about it. And I think returning to that is probably a good starting point if you're thinking, oh, what do I want? What do I want to practice in my adult life that provides me a sense of satisfaction, gives me an experience of creativity? I think it's the smart thing is probably to go back.
Just go back to the source, go back to the basics.
Yeah.
What excites you? And we can build from there. Just look, peel away the layers, and go back, to as simple and as whimsical as it possibly could be. Just, what did you get excited about when you were a kid?
Mm-hmm.
That's, I didn't think about it like that. Because again, I'm learning every time I have these conversations. So you really put me for a pause there. Wow. Oh, wow. I'm not going to keep you too long. I just want to end off with one last question. Where is the Candid Frame headed? What, again, 13 plus years and still pushing through?
Yeah, I get asked that question now that it's almost 500 episodes, and I go, I have no idea. Just like I didn't have any idea of back in 2006. I really have no idea going forward. I have some ideas of what things I'd like to do based on what I do with the show. And I'm actually going to try and sit down with someone in the next couple of weeks and kind of discuss that. But I suspect that I'll keep doing this until I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just hope that I can keep my voice and my hearing. You know, because that would make interviewing people very difficult. But you know, I've seen people like Dick Cavett, you know, and you know, people who have been doing this for a very, very long time. Studs Terkel, who's my personal hero, he was doing it until probably final years of his life in terms of sitting down there with a tape recorder and interviewing people.
Wow.
I like having conversations with people, and I could see myself just doing this for a long time. Ideally, I would like to create the circumstances where all I have to do is do the interviewing and the research.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where I don't have to do all the things in terms of uploading the blog post and pulling all the material to do the research. I would just love to have enough money where I could hire people and say, I'm going to interview this person, get me all the research material so I can just sit down in my chair, study it over several days, and then go in and record the interview, and everything else is taken care of. That for me would be just like ideal, because right now when it's, you know, I got a job, I got a family, I got, you know, so many things that I'm trying to do that it makes time to sit down and research. Like every time I have somebody with a book, I try to read through the whole book.
Oh, wow.
And that sometimes is just like, that's speed reading. You know, I got this book here for a person I'm interviewing soon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And look at how thick that thing is.
It's a volume.
And I'm not even halfway through. And I got to interview them next weekend. So it's just like, okay. I take care of everything else I get done. Because I think it's important when I'm interviewing, especially someone who's written a book, to have a conversation about the book. And
obviously,
usually you can get some really good insights into them and to the work as a result of reading it. And I know that there are some people who interview people who've not read the books, and I just go,
why would you do that?
And the guests know it. You know,
comes across.
Know it. You know, I'm not going to come in and go, oh, tell me about what your book's about. It's like, hell, I should know what the book is about. I shouldn't have to waste that person's time in having them describe it.
You're the guest. I should know.
So, in terms of future, I'll keep doing it, but I would like the means to be able to sort of delegate some of the other things that I would rather not do, so I can dedicate more to, you know, the stuff that really ends up making a difference on the actual episodes.
For what it's worth, you can definitely know that all this work that you've put in has impacted more than a few individuals, more than a few souls, whether it's from your local area, across the country, or across the world, all the way up to Quebec, Canada. Ibarionex, I cannot thank you enough for this amazing, humbling, and honorable opportunity to have you on the receiving end of the Awaken the Awesome podcast. I promised that I would not keep you because, again, I like to keep my promises. But again, it's a very emotional thing for me because, first of all, it proves me that I'm not crazy. Just showing people the manifestation of what can happen when you stay true and you run with a stupid idea. I call it stupid, but, you know, just run with an idea, guys, and realize that, again, your personal heroes are human beings just like you. Put in the work, and you never know. You never know the wonderful opportunities that come out of, you know, just the randomness of the universe. So, Ibarionex, thank you so much for this amazing time. Running tradition on the podcast, just leaving off the floor to the guest, a kind word, a thought, a quote, a sonnet, whatever, a music quote, just inspiring people to, you know, just level up and take, you know, one next step to, you know, waking up tomorrow towards the next level. What can we leave the listeners with?
Try something new this weekend. That's it.
Yeah. That's it. We need to change our habits. Try something new. Thank you so much. It's been an honor. Just again, shameless plugging. Where can the listeners connect with you over the interwebs?
For the show, they can go to thecandidframe.com. There I have some work, my photographic work, links to my books, but more importantly, they can find The Candid Frame, all the episodes there. We do have an app, so if you want to download and listen all the way back to episode 1, whether it's an Android or Apple, you can listen to it that way. You can also listen to it by streaming it off the website or going to your podcaster app of choice, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcast app. And then as well, I'm on Instagram. So if you want to keep up with the work that I'm producing on a regular basis as a photographer, you just go at Ibarionex, which is at symbol IBARIONEX.
There you go, guys. Definitely check it out. Not just a wonderful radio voice, but terrific interviews, leading up to almost 500 interviews now. Guys, you definitely should check out the Candid Frame podcast. Again, available on all your preferred podcasting platforms. Definitely show some love, show some support, because it is well deserved. Ibarionex, thank you so much for your time, guys. I am once again your host Olivier Day from Kodiak, Quebec, Canada. Thank you so much for your love and support towards the Awaken the Awesome podcast. Be safe, stay sane, stay wonderful, stay awesome. Have a terrific day, guys. Talk to you soon.
This has been another episode of the Awaken the Awesome podcast. We do love to get your feedback, so please drop us a line. Our email address, awakentheawesome@gmail.com. Also, if you haven't already, please hop on over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, give us a rating, and leave us a review. We always do appreciate your support, and thank you for listening. Stay awesome.